Welcome, Lina, to our podcast, Patterns and Stories. Lina is a pioneer in education and schooling, especially in India. I want to start by asking, looking back, what do you think were the biggest gaps in the current or the traditional, if I may say, education that you wanted to fix? What were the key things that you wanted to urgently address?
So interestingly, you use the word reform, right, in your question, and it's very difficult to reform anything. Especially in education. So you basically just have to go in there, do your disruptive thing, and hope it sticks. It's as crazy and as simple as that. I always count myself, I always say I'm a positive disruptor. I'm an outlaw, right? Because I'm always the cowboy trying to do very, very different things in a space, especially in places like India that are still very conventional in their thinking. We were ruled by the British Raj. The education system was set up by the Britishers in India, the existing system, and we've not really been able to kind of pull away from that. So, where public policy in India, the existing system, and we've not really been able to kind of pull away from that. Where public policy and reforms are really challenging, I think it takes disruptive entrepreneurs to just come in, shake things up, and then when it works, then everybody says, "Wow, this works," and let's go along and ship the journey. So when I came in 1993 with Kangaroo Kids, we actually only started with 10 kids. Why 10 kids? Because every parent who walked in the door would say, "Will you get my child ready for the entrance exam? This is into junior kindergarten or grade 1 of this school." Right? So they're saying specific school needs an entrance exam for a little child who is supposed to be curious and explore and not be taught things by rote. And yet what these preschools at that time were doing is rote teaching kids. So then what they do is, it was almost like backward corruption. They'd go and get the exam papers of the entrance exams for 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. And then they would take that back and put that in as their curriculum. So children could answer, "Who is the father of the nation?" at the age of 3. Mahatma Gandhi. But that is such an abstract concept, right? Father of the nation for somebody who is a historical figure. How do 3-year-olds even get their minds around that? They can't. So you basically were teaching them how to parrot response. And that's what in 1993 I started getting away from. I said, "No, I will not turn your child into a parrot, but I will do what's developmentally appropriate for your child," and started teaching parents. And that's why I write the books. Because if you teach parents that there's windows of opportunity in brains that are developing, you explain it through examples and specifics. So saying, when a child's got a lazy eye, what does a doctor do? And they'll say they bandage one eye. But which eye do they bandage? They bandage the strong eye. Why do they bandage the strong eye? Because the weaker eye now will be forced to develop that neural pathway for eyesight in the other eye. So then you explain how those windows of opportunity are open at specific times, right? Because if an adult's got a weak eye, doing the same exercise doesn't work for the adult because the neurocircuitry is already pretty strong. The highways in the brain are already set. So when you explain it to parents with these tangible kind of examples, then parents start understanding, okay, so we're saying that we're going to take the windows of opportunity that are open between 0 and 6, and we're going to do the right activities and exploration and allow discoveries so that that's how the brain will develop. So, one of the biggest gaps is always that neuroscience is teaching us so much day after day, and still only the tip of the iceberg. We still don't know what human consciousness is, for example. The most brilliant scientists cannot actually really tell you what human consciousness is, that when we have a thought, where does it go? Is there like a field of intelligence that it goes into? We don't know all these things, right? These are things we don't know. But we do increasingly know more and more about the brain. Like the example I just gave you, there's even more we know today about how the subconscious works, how beliefs get set in a child. And what we do is we don't create the education system or the learning sessions or everything else. We don't design them to the way the brain actually works. So then what we're doing, it is like a factory model. It's like compliance, not curiosity. That's what we're teaching to kids, right? Behave, sit down. Now, that was when I did 1993. In 2017, I sold Kangaroo Kids and Billabong High because we're coming to a different age altogether. And remember, I sold it, Ismail, before ChatGPT became a thing, right? So I sold it before AI was already at our doorstep. But because I did so much research I knew that things were going to change. Things were around the corner, and that this is what we call the creator economy. And then, so what do we have to do in the creator economy? What do we have to teach kids? How do we teach kids to feel emotionally safe because things are changing so quickly? The outside world has changed so rapidly, but from an evolutionary perspective, our brains and our minds and our hearts and our bodies have not changed. So how do we do it so that kids feel emotionally safe? They know how to regulate in these times of rapid change. And how do we get deep learning and happiness? At the end of the day, we're all born. If you ask anybody, what do you actually want to be? Nobody's saying, I want to drive a Ferrari, or I want to be happy. But we don't teach kids how to be actually happy.
Lina, I was going through one of your earlier, I think it is from 2012. Who Are You Kidding? It's an interesting title. And one of the chapters at the start is titled 21st Century Child. And can you expand a little bit? But this is a bit old book, but still,
That's
what do you
redundant.
mean by?
Do not read that book.
I see.
Because the information in there is from 2012. Today, if I was to rewrite the book, it would be completely different. So I'm not just going to say who are 21st century, who is going to be valued in the world going forward. In this world of AI and everything else, who are the types of people who will be valued going forward? And therefore, from there, you can extrapolate the kind of skills they'll need. Yeah, so call them 21st century skills, just call them human skills, call them whatever. But you can, so the first type of person in a world full of AI is going to be the highly emotionally intelligent people, right? So you'll have AI giving you a better diagnosis, a more accurate diagnosis than a doctor. But you'll still need a doctor to hold your hand and say, what does this disease mean to you? How is it going to impact your life? And what are some of the things you can do to self-regulate? I think doctors are going to change from prescribers of medicine to more lifestyle doctors who teach you how to cope at an emotional level with what's going on. So the doctors who actually understand deeper about the connection of the brain, the heart, the stomach, the gut. The gut is the seat of so many things. We only treat the brain and the heart in terms of education, but we have to teach kids to constantly be healing their guts as well. So this kind of doctor is going to be a very different doctor. He's going to be forever learning, but he's going to have very high EQ. So that's number one. Your second person is somebody with what we can call like a personal copyright, a personal monopoly, which is a subset of skills and interests that uniquely come together that make it very difficult to replicate this person. Like, say, take me, for example. I've read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hours about the brain. And in the brain, I'm not reading about the technical aspects of the brain, right? I'm reading all the research on motivation, reading all the research on when the brain understands why it's doing something, why does it do it better? So what does fear do to the brain? What does joy do to the brain? What are the brain chemicals that get released? And how do they get released differently based on the thoughts you have? So my reading is vast in the area of the brain. Then my second area of reading that's very, very vast is in the area of human behavior. So what makes people stuck? What gets them moving forward? Again, what motivates them? What drives them? How do people come up with deeply curious questions? And if we allowed them to follow those deeply curious questions, how could their life really be impacted? And how could humanity be impacted in return? Because kids are really following a path of deep curiosity, trying to solve something that they don't understand about the world, or so forth. So that's the second type of person. So we've got EQ, we've got a person with personal copyright, personal monopoly, a subset of skills. My other subset of skills is I understand the science of learning. So I know how to design it based on the brain. But I also keep teaching in every session kids about their brains and their behavior. Because if kids can master their brains, their thoughts, their actions, and then therefore their behaviors, they're going to be successful. Yeah, it's a given. But if they master only what is calculus or what is this or what is that, in that state, even though they may get A pluses, success is not a given. Because you can master content, but if you have to master yourself, you're lost. So the second type of person is this person with the personal monopoly. The third type of person is the most specialized person in their field. So we had a shock this year because there's this institution in India called the IIT. So everyone was rushing to IITs to become engineers. And this year, for the first year, these kids don't have jobs. So they've spent their entire life preparing to be accepted in the IIT, huge amounts of money to be trained and tutored to be accepted into the IIT. And when they finish the IIT, they've got no job. Unless you're the best engineer, or you're the best doctor, or you're the best golfer, or the best swimmer, or the best podcaster. Yeah, you've got to be the best in the field. for you to be highly successful. So that's the third type of person. And the fourth type of person is a moonshot thinker. A moonshot thinker, somebody who thinks in a visionary way, in ways that people don't usually think. So people who think in disruptive ways, people who think in divergent ways, people who connect the dots that other people won't connect, people who think about how to connect A, B, and C to solve a problem somebody else wouldn't put together easily. So these are four types of people. If those are the four types of people that will be valued in the world going forward, and I come across these four types of people after doing lots and lots of interviews and lots of research and reading. So I've interviewed people like Seth Godin. I've interviewed people like Angela Lee Duckworth, the author of Grit. And based on this, I'm saying, okay, these are the four types of people who will be valued. Now, if you take those four types of people and you now extrapolate the skills that will create those four types of people, you need an education system that's based highly on giving kids the skills and tools of EQ and in fun and engaging ways, not through theory. But, really, we do such interesting things. Like, for example, you watch one scene in a movie and you watch it to four different soundtracks. One that's motivational, one that's scary, one that's very romantic. And you ask kids to decide for the scene and what is going on based on these four soundtracks. So then kids immediately start thinking divergently about how the impact of music on who they are. Yeah. Or the impact of when we're watching a movie on how the emotions get. And you'll teach them that when you watch somebody cry on a screen, the mirror neurons that are basis for empathy get fired. So even though we are doing this podcast through a screen, our mirror neurons are still firing with each other. We've still got a sense of connection. So you're going to build divergent thinking in your curriculum. You're going to build high amounts of EQ building in, curriculum. You're going to build you're going to give kids free time to specialize, because if their whole 9 to 5 day or 9 to 4 day or whatever the school timing is gone on this in learning the core curriculum, where is the time for kids to specialize? Those 10,000 hours that they need to become a specialist, where do they get them from? So you have to free up time in a child's day for them to become highly specialized. And then you've got to free up time for them to explore different things and ask those deeply curious questions that get them to start thinking about what problem they want to solve in the world. How do they want to contribute to humanity?
Loka, you want to?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lina. I love what you're saying. And especially, I loved how you said that your 2012 book was already outdated. When I remember that when I was at university, I was studying on some books from the 60s, and people thought it was completely the same. And while it was true that maybe the subject didn't change, I was studying mechanics and the principle of mechanics didn't change. For sure, there is the fact that we definitely should have improved about how we are teaching mechanics, and the fact that the book was the same meant that no one was thinking about how to improve the teaching. And the question I have for you is, I love how you seem so curious and always adapting. And how do you get to communicate this to the teachers that work for you? How you get them to adapt and to change the traditional way of teaching?
So we have a powered by Dreamtime curriculum that we started a year ago, that now in India, in Oman, Dubai, over 50 schools use. And we're only 1 year in the making. Because the fact is this, that you can't get teachers to understand the whole range of the research that I've done for all these years. Brain science, the behavioral science, the future context of the world, the science of learning. That's hours and hours and hours I've packed into doing what I'm doing. So I work with 80, we call them curiosity and excitement architects. In traditional lingo, you call them instructional designers. But if you say you're an instructional designer, then what is an instructional designer going to do? Going to take some content and design it to be instructed. So we call them curiosity and excitement architects. So in my in the training, I do the training and work directly with each of these 80 curiosity and excitement architects. And what we do is then we actually create digitally and fidgetly, so we have workbooks as well, the curriculum that kids will use in the classroom. Along with it's scripted, it's got all the prompts and everything else that a teacher will do. So one is to teach teachers about growth mindset theory and growth mindset responses. And you can do that again and again and again. But a teacher's going to go back to her style because it's not gone deep. We skim the surface when we train. It's not gone deep. But now say, for example, and as part of an exercise that kids are doing, say on storytelling. And we keep learning really relevant. So when we're doing, kids are going to learn how to tell a story because they've watched an emotional ad, which is also a story, and they've watched something on social media that's got lots of likes and stuff like that. Now they're going to decode what makes a good story, right? And they're going to go in their groups. So one group's going to be X, previously Twitter. One group's going to be Facebook. One group's going to be Instagram. Yeah. And one group's going to be YouTube. So now it's relevant and relatable because that is the world that the kids are in. So now they have to understand, and they've got handouts to understand how these four different mediums of telling stories, how do they use algorithms? How do they hook you? The kids start understanding how the brain is hooked for fear. It's on the alert for fear all the time. And that's why 24/7 breaking news is always breaking news. It's always horrendous because that's how it hooks our brain to watch and get the TRP ratings up. So these are the things that kids learn from doing this simple exercise of taking a concept and creating an emotional story through one of these. They put the music to it, they do everything. Now that's a way more exciting way of kids doing stories or teaching a concept that they've learned than other ways. I don't think I'm going to come back to your question because I think I've forgotten the original question.
Yeah, the question was about how you train the teachers.
So this is all scaffolded in a design. Every classroom now only needs a smart TV, which is not expensive. And all of this multimedia and everything is in the design. The scripting is given to them. Example, they're doing this. Now the teacher's walking around the room. I was talking about growth mindset. So teacher's walking around the room. And now instead of saying, oh, that's a pretty picture, she's got her growth mindset responses questions to ask that, like coaching questions. What would happen if you changed that color? What do you think would change? How do you think creating the story in this way is going to resonate with an audience? Who is your audience? So asking questions that prompt her thinking, but she's got all the questions with her. They're in the script. So till we can get to a space where, like IB, you take an IB school. How can that ever be easily accessible by everyone? That is a thought that I had when I created the curriculum I did. But it goes beyond the IB in that it teaches kids about their brains and behavior deeply, how to master their emotions deeply in a way that, the IB framework with existing teachers and their level of training cannot do. So this is how we train the teachers. Every time they open the learning management system, it's a training for them. And teachers are saying that as they teach kids, they learn so much about themselves and they start changing their own patterns and belief systems and ways of thinking about the world. Because, for example, if you're going to do something something that's, say, relevant in the world today, right? So you take how a president comes into power, yeah? And we all know which president. But now you say, you take that president who's come into power and you take one of his things that he's saying. He's saying the same thing. It's recorded. It's on video. But now you take CNN's take on it, and then you take Fox's take on it. Now, that exercise teaches kids more about communication, more about cognitive bias, more about how tolerance is not something that we're embedding in the world, we're pulling it further apart, creating friction and wars. We're creating, things like trade wars because the world is not seeing themselves as one. Yeah. But kids will learn this through things like this. But all these activities are back designed to make kids curious and then get them excited. So I'll give you an example. Math's great too. So before we start a session, there's what we call an emotional hook. And an emotional hook shows two faces. Yeah. And same faces. One is slightly different than the other. We ask kids, which one do you find more attractive? And they'll say this one. And we'll say, do you know your brain? Now, the world will go, oh, but you're teaching kids what beauty looks like. I said, I'm not teaching kids what beauty. That's the brain's response, that the brain likes symmetrical things. So brains find symmetrical faces more beautiful than non-symmetrical faces. Now, that's not something that's a fact. Then you can teach kids how to look at the uniqueness of a person who may not have a completely symmetrical face. But this is fact. And kids then get, oh, really? Oh, is this how it is? And then we say, okay, go research who the most beautiful people in the world are and go and figure out what the symmetry is. Now they're hooked into what symmetry is. Then we show them why the brain loves symmetry in nature, in everything else. That's how our brains have evolved, to like that balance and that beauty and that symmetry. Then we teach them about symmetry, right? And then we want to teach them about the uniqueness of the individual. So then we show them how snowflakes, each one is perfectly symmetrical, but there's no identical snowflakes. Then they go on to creating a snowflake of their own in grade 2. So maths teaching symmetry, but they've learned so much about the brain and behavior that they would not have known if they just learned symmetry from a textbook.
Lina, thank you for your enthusiasm about it. It motivates us as well. And yesterday I saw an announcement, a job advertisement from the World Bank, and the title was Innovation Officer Storytelling. So this was one of the strangest job titles I've seen. Innovation Officer with the hyphen and storytelling. So I was telling my colleagues as well about this. So in a sense, the job market and everything is changing, but I think most of the people in the policy world, economists and others as well, agree that our system, the traditional system, kind of over prioritize credentials, and it under prioritize some of the things that you mentioned. When you look at there was one a few years back, there was this book which became very popular by David Epstein called Range, which kind of points out that maybe if you're trained as more as a generalist and limit kind of specialization maybe at a later stage, or how do you think about these kind of issues? The job market is changing, and still how do we adjust the education of a child or the young person to suit to the rapid change in the world around him or her?
First thing is, I think I should go and apply for that job. Look, one is policy is very slow to change. I don't know how it is in the countries you live in, but like we've come up with the new education policy, but it's like a document. It's a document that's taken from the best practices all across the world. But how do you go from A to Z? How do you scaffold that process? It doesn't exist. So you can even change policy, but if you don't have a plan to execute the policy in its new format, then it's of no use. So for me, I prefer to work at the grassroots with the kids. We're one education brand where the kids see something on Instagram and go to the parents and say, I want to go to the school. Because that is my fight all the time. Because my problem, this is one strange area, education, where your consumer and your customer are two different people. Someone buys the education, but somebody else is actually experiencing it. And we need to be able to start turning that on its head. We've got to try and put the power back in the kids' hands. The kids know what's relevant. The kids know what's relatable. The kids know the future of the world is different. The kids know how to use ChatGPT. They're learning much faster than we are. And I think it's our fear of change that's holding them back. I work with the kids. If we're teaching them about plants, we tell them all the new avenues of work that are open now. We do our teacher training. We do our basic teacher training, which is the basic teacher training is explaining to the teachers why the learning design is the way it is. Because if they understand why, like, where is the world going, right? We've destroyed 52% of the world's forests. If we don't get kids to be mindful consumers, if we don't get them to feel whole within themselves without needing the Gucci, Prada, Maserati, and all of that, then we don't have a world that's going to exist for our future generations. So then so that's what we teach the teachers, right? We teach them why the curriculum exists the way it is. What is the major problems in the world that we're wanting to address? And how are these kids going to become the leaders that address those problems going forward? And then you work with the kids. You teach the kids about what all the new things in the world are. And even with our teacher training, I'm saying, why does teachers don't get paid very much in India. I don't know how it is where you guys are, but teachers don't get trained. People talk about Finland education, but look at what the teachers are getting paid. They're getting paid as much as doctors and everyone else. Now you want to take a Finland education and put it in India with Indian teachers who don't think in that format. So actually your kids are worse off because you've got a framework that teachers can't execute and don't know how to go. So the second is, how do you take teachers and put them on a career path journey so that you're teaching them entrepreneurship, you're teaching them skills that can lift their own lives, and therefore then they start thinking about how to lift the lives of the kids. So I think, Ismail, a lot of things can't happen top to down. I think a lot of change and disruptions happens at the grassroots levels and then kind of bubbles up.
Thank you so much. I had a question about how, in every class there are different students. How do you ensure that everyone is engaged, and how, if there is a disruptive kid, maybe, how do you, what do you do in those situations?
So I don't use the word a disruptive kid. Firstly, I say an active child. So why do kids disrupt? We don't go to the root of why do kids disrupt? I'll ask you, why would kids disrupt the class?
Well, I would say that the number one thing is that the teacher is not interesting, or the lesson is not interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The kids are bored, or so the number one reason anyone disrupts anything is they're bored. Yeah. So if the lesson is kept really, my kids rate the lessons. So if one of our lessons don't get rated highly, we go back to redesign it. So the kids, if kids are bored, yeah, now they can be bored for a couple of reasons. Either the stretch is too much, the learning stretch is too much, or the learning stretch is too low. So they're either bored because they can't, or they're bored because they can't comprehend and they can't get to the next step. So one is to put the scaffolding processes for kids who are not who are over challenged, right? So their brains are not being able to scaffold from what you're teaching to work. And the second thing is, if you scaffold within the lesson plan itself, you solve 90% of your problem. So say, for example, have you ever seen the TED Talk Paradox of Choice?
No.
Okay. So there's a really interesting TED Talk called Paradox of Choice, where this researcher, he's talking about, and I forgot his name, but he's talking about how choice is making us less happy, right? Excess choice is making us less happy. And he goes through the research and he talks about, and like once upon a time, you went to a store to buy jeans, have dark jeans or light jeans, and you'd pick the color you want and you walk out. Now you've got dark jeans and light jeans, jeans with zips and buttons and buckles, and jeans that are stonewashed, and ripped jeans, and there are millions of types of jeans to choose from. And the brain does not like it. The brain gets anxious with too much choice. We believe, because the world of consumerism wants us to believe that choice is good. But if you teach kids this concept, right, at a very young age, then they start thinking about things very differently. So you want to teach the paradox of choice to kids who are 3 years old, 4 years old. So the way you would do it is you would start off with showing them two wardrobes. One wardrobe's got 2 colored t-shirts, the other wardrobe's got colored t-shirts, blah, 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 blah. You ask them, which wardrobe would you choose from? And most kids will say this one, the superheroes and all the things on them and everything. And then you actually take them and get them to understand from a very simple brain model what choice does to the brain. And my adults, I tell them, once upon a time, you'd go to a DVD store or a CD store and pick up a DVD and come home and watch it. And you were very happy. And you'd probably pick maybe 2 DVDs. But you'd come home, you'd make your popcorn, you'd sit down, the family would sit down and you'd watch the movie. It was a great thing. Today, you've got hundreds of platforms to choose from, and then hundreds and thousands of movies within each, and different types of things. And the brain is confused. So excess choice is actually making us happy. And you can teach this to very young kids. And then when the kids are now becoming consumers, they actually train the parents. So I just came back from a conference called OPI, and somebody was asking me, how do you tangibly see the difference in kids? And one of the educators is a parent. Both his kids go to my online school. And he also takes up Powered by curriculum for his school. So he said, let me give you an example of how I've tangibly seen it. He said, I'll give you 2 examples. One is, he's an educator. So he's interviewing somebody online for a coordinator position. And he finishes that interview and he thinks he's asked very, very clever questions. And he finishes the interview and he's looking to his daughter and saying, how did I do? Did I do well? She goes, no, you were terrible. So he goes, why? She said, you didn't ask a single question that will tell you whether that coordinator's got a growth mindset or not. And that's going to make all the difference on how progressive she is as a coordinator. And he said, I was gobsmacked. And then she went to ChatGPT to show him how to ask the growth mindset questions to the educator and what responses would suggest you got a growth mindset or not. He said the second example is the younger kid. So he's got 2 kids in my school. The younger kid, he goes there, they're in a mall, and he says to her, are you hungry? I'm hungry. She goes, you know why you're feeling hungry? He goes, no, why am I feeling hungry? She said, you're looking at the McDonald's sign and it's yellow and red. Red indicates urgency and yellow indicates happiness, and together they stimulate your appetite. She goes, let's move away from there and see if you still feel hungry. So kids are now mindfully thinking about the world, how the world impacts them, and how they impact the world in return. So you can teach very, very challenging concepts to very, very young children as long as you scaffold it. So that's what we do for the teachers.
Lina, you have formed several which has changed the field of schooling. For a young person watching this and who wants to change the education field, what is the advice you would give, or the lessons that you have learned in the process? I mean, India is not an easy place to build these kind of business entities, in a sense, or reforms. It's a challenging environment. And also you mentioned about you have opened Dreamtime Learning in Oman, which has a different kind of culture. What are the lessons and what advice would you give for those who want to move in your footsteps, younger people who want to move?
So first thing, so yesterday I sat with two investors who were looking at whether they should, invest in expanding. We also have micro schools. So we've got two micro schools and we're expanding the micro school concept in India. So they came and they were asking that, they came to work out whether they should invest. And I said, everything do for the right reasons, right? So you have to really love children. You really have to want to make an impact in the world. And you really have to believe that because of what you're doing, the world's going to be a better place when you die. If you're doing it for money is a process that happens. If I think the intention and the thing is correct. And as IBM has asked, be very imaginative and be a great storyteller. Because what I do is always so new, I have to be able to tell the stories. So when I'm talking to parents, I'm going to have to change because they've already got a cognitive bias and belief about what education looks like. And to be able to reform that brain, to be able to turn those wheels differently in the parent's brain, I've got to be a great storyteller. I've got to tell not stories in an abstract way, but with analogies, examples, and stuff like that. So for anyone who wants to do it for the right reasons, is the first thing I'd say. Go to take a big chart paper or digital board, and first just write down all the reasons why you want to do it. Why do you want to do education? Do you want to, and that's what I told these guys yesterday. If you're doing it and you want to safeguard, because, the amount of money they're going to invest, I said, that's nothing to you and it's nothing to me, right? So if you're trying to safeguard that, then you're coming at this all the wrong ways. Think of every reason why you want to do this, and is that enough? So when I went to my family, so I'd already sold my other business, so I'd made money, but we're a family enterprise, so we put everything, we're all together, two brothers and myself. And I went to them and the question was this: how much money are you willing to risk as a family for me to have the potential to change the lives of children, education, and possibly the world? So it's what question are you asking yourself as to why you want to do this? Because if you're going to do something that's old school, then don't even do it, because you're going to get, very soon you'll be redundant. I think today, even Harvard and IITs and everyone is saying, but what's next? What's around the corner? How do we do this? What are we preparing these kids for? I mean, it's no mystery that even if whether you're a neurosurgeon or just a general surgeon, or you're studying medicine, you got into your first year of medicine, and by the fourth year, what you've learned in the first year is redundant. That's why I said my book's redundant. Don't buy it. Please don't buy. Who do you think you're kidding? It's old. The information and understanding I have now, and to rewrite the book is completely different. Drama
But
Team that I wrote is a better book because I wrote it later. And I relied a lot more. I'd done a lot more reading in the area of neuroscience. And that was my book of bringing people together. And it's how my curriculum is as well. So every chapter, for example, deals with teaching the parent what the teenager is going through, and then teaching the teenager what's he risking, and therefore bringing them closer together. Because unless you understand who's on the other side of the fence and what they're thinking and why they're thinking, what baggage have they brought to their thinking, what experiences have they brought to their thinking, you can't change their thinking. So for any entrepreneur wanting to get into education, I just say, do it for the right reason. Because then magic happens. When you're doing it for the right reasons, your intention's correct. I'm telling you, the whole universe really does conspire.
the other important party in education is the parent. There is an interesting quote in your whole book that from Hodding Carter, there are only two lasting bequests we can hope to give our children. One is roots, the other is wings. Thought it was a nice quote. But what is that the parents, how given everything, how everything is changing? And even if you look at a newspaper these days, it is as if empathy has disappeared from the earth. And so it's a challenging time for parents as well. So what is the advice you give parents these days,
So
especially with young children?
it's only as much courage as a parent has that they can actually make an impact on the child. So we've got to a place where the child is is being challenged on all counts. So you got two parents working. Now these parents are feeling guilty. So they overgive to their kids. That's making their kids weaker. That's getting their kids to feel like they can get things from the world without having to work for it. Not good for their brains or their behavior. So one thing is. Second is we bubble wrap them. Because we're reading these newspaper headlines and we're getting more and more fearful as human beings, we're starting to protect our kids more and more and more. So we're bubble wrapping them. I used to travel to Australia by myself when I was 14 years old. I allowed my son to travel to Australia by himself when he was 4 years old, unaccompanied, mind out, because I knew, and he was ready. So as a parent, I need to know what my kid's ready for, right? So when a parent asks me, should I put my kid in boarding school or not? I said, it's not a either or general question. You really need to know your kid and where your kid's going to thrive the most. And then therefore, you make sure that you put a child in the environment where it's going to thrive. So the only thing is, all I can say is that to tell parents is that the future actually belongs to those who dare to learn differently. And the problem I'll tell parents is that the problem is that the decision is in your hands. So you're going to have to dare to allow them to learn differently. And because only in that differently will they actually be ready for this new world that's around the corner. And we don't know what this world looks like. Let's be honest. Nobody knew what's happening in areas of the world would actually happen like that. I don't even think people who voted in favor would have thought that this is where the world, that these are some of the outcomes that will happen. So we don't know what comes around the corner. The only certainty we have is that there is uncertainty. That's the only certainty we have. So in a world of uncertainty, what are the skills? Like those 4 types of people, in a world of uncertainty, what skills do you bring to being? So self-regulation is really important. In a world that's really changing, you need to be able to center and regulate. In a world that's really changing, you've got to be a lifelong learner. But then how do you become a lifelong learner? You've got to be excited about learning. So that's what we do. We don't measure, you can't measure whether a kid's a lifelong learner. If I say as a school, we produce kids who are lifelong learners, come to our school. As a parent, I'd say, how do you measure that? Because the kid's left your school and gone off. How are you going to measure that he actually turned out to be a lifelong learner? But if they're excited about learning, if they're deeply curious and they're excited about learning, you know you've got a lifelong learner. Because learning's not a chore, right? Even on Sundays, I'm learning. Because it's like this, this unearthing of mysteries that the brain loves. Teaching of facts, the brain doesn't love. The unearthing of mysteries, the brain loves. So, when for example, we're teaching Harry Potter and the kids go, platform 9 3/4 and they disappear through it. We ask them, is that likely to be like a parallel universe, a wormhole? Now they're going into quantum physics and they're learning about parallel universes. And we'll ask kids who are, who are learning about atoms and molecules and matter. And we'll say, could thoughts contain matter? Could thoughts be made up of matter? Now they're going down a rabbit hole of curiosity. And because the greater learning is in the mysteries, it's not in the facts. So, to open up those mysteries. So, to parents, I just say, please be brave. Please be more courageous. Please don't be scared of change because the world's changing so rapidly around your kids. Embrace it and dare to help them learn differently.
I had a colleague, his son finished a degree overseas, and he was complaining that he, in fact, asked me to advise his child about the importance of reading. So his concern is, I think it's seen in the some of the statistics, even people are not reading these days, or even in the school system, or when you complete a degree, there is not as much reading books. So what do you think? Is this a trend, or is this something we should worry about?
So the first thing is this, right? Reading was once something that we feared. I don't know if you know this. Historically, when the technology of the printing press happened, we were scared of kids reading because we said that we thought that it would take away from their memories. I don't come in education from a place of fear. I come from a place of possibility. So reading was once the only way we absorbed information. And that's great for a visual learner. But what about if you're an auditory learner? Why don't I let you use an audiobook? Or why don't I let you learn from podcasts? Are you going to learn less from podcasts than you are from a book? Whatever we're talking about could be written in a book, or somebody could be watching this and get the same amount of information, or somebody could be listening to it while they're walking in the morning and get the same amount of information. So I never come from a place of fear. I come from a place of possibility. Second thing is, if we want kids to be readers, give them interesting stuff. We're still giving them Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, when kids don't even know how to handle their emotional states or relationships or anything else. Right? Even if we're teaching Harry Potter or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, we make it so relevant and relatable. In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, we've got these different kids who've been brought up really differently. We actually teach kids parenting styles and what makes for the best parenting style according to research. Then the kids go and study these characters and go back and decode what their parenting style would have been for these kids to turn out like that. Kids who believe that they can flaunt any rule, have no respect. When they want something, they will just jump in and grab it. So we've got to make all of this really relevant and relatable. If parents used to ask me when I ran Billabong High, I had comic books in my library and they would be against that. I said, if your kid picks up a book and reads it, doesn't matter what it is. The art of engagement is what's important. Now, reading is such a wide thing. Are you talking about fiction, nonfiction? Now, if kids understand that nonfiction or fiction takes them to places of imagination and that the ideas that they'll get, and that's the way we do it, right? So we'll take, I think it's an old book, it's an old science fiction book, and in it there's a paragraph, and we give that handout to kids and say, read this paragraph and what is it describing? And they'll say the iPad or the tablet. And I said, do you know when this book was written? This book was written when these technologies could not even, they were science fiction. They're today's science fact. So do you know the power of reading? Because somebody has read that, stored it in their subconscious, whether it was Steve Jobs or whoever else has read that book, stored it in his subconscious, read something else, stored it in his subconscious, and those things then have come magically together to create the tablet, the iPad, the iPhone.
Luca, you want to? Sorry.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
reading. Non-fictional reading, you can do it in any way you want.
Yeah, I love that. As a closing question, I just wanted to ask, what is one question that maybe you wish that when you go on a podcast, people would ask you about, but you usually don't get maybe the chance to talk about much?
Why do I place such an onus on mastery of the self more than? So we've spoken about so many things, right? What should education? We've come from like a top-down perspective. What should education look like? What should it be? I'm saying if everything in this world is about from when the child is born, our jobs as parents are like any other animal in the animal kingdom job, which is tomorrow if I die, my child should be better off than today. I've given survival skills, thriving skills, all those skills to my kids before I die. That's my job. That's my job as a parent. If parents actually think of that as a job, then it's fantastic. The second is I have a saying, and nobody asked me why I say it. I said every human being should feel that their biological child is one of their children, and all the other children of the world are their karmic children, the spiritual children, however you want to put that word. Then we won't see wars. Then we won't see this, policies that are just loggerheads with each other. Then we won't have the corruption. Yeah. Because we don't think that way. Because then our education system teaches us to compete, not collaborate. That's where corruption comes from. We use the basis of corruption, like Dark Waters, the Teflon story, how somebody for power and profit took human lives. He was a murderer. These guys knew what they were doing, and they still went on doing it for commercial gain. What kind of a world are we living in? When we're willing to plunder people, we're willing to plunder the planet, we're willing to plunder animals at any cost, as long as it gives us money. And does that money, if that money was buying us happiness, if it was, but it's not, depression is on the rise in the world. Suicides are on the rise in the world. So we've gone terribly wrong. We should fix it.
One final we ask all guests is some book recommendations on the theme. I think you mentioned a few your books as well, the book about mindset. Do you have any?
So I'll give you one book that changed my life. So let me not give you many books. Let me give you the one book that changed my life. It's called The Biology of Belief. It's by Dr. Bruce Lipton. And it's transformed how I see the connection between science and consciousness. So science and spirituality, however you want to put spiritual, because I'm not religious. When I say spiritual, I'm not coming from any point of religion. But it explores how our thoughts, environment, and beliefs can actually shift our DNA. So we've got the power. We think we're born with genetics that we can't shift. But this book gives us insights into how we can actually, through our thinking, through then the beliefs we set up, we can rewire our DNA. Now, imagine the power of that for teachers, for educators, for parents, right? That potential is unlimited. So we've got to move from the confines of limited curriculum, that this is what we're going to teach at this grade, we're going to teach this, and these are learning outcomes, and boom, 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 boom. This is how we'll assess, and this is how we grade, and this is when you get 99 or 100 or fail or whatever else, that's prescriptive and it's very narrow. The world is so vast. So if we can come from teaching from a place of possibility, potential, hope, then it's great.
Thank you so much, Lina. I've really loved this, and it's probably like the video call in which I've been the most emotionally touched, because I also feel so strongly about those topics and I can see the impact, and so thank you so much for doing what you're doing and for helping others see what's behind it and why it's important. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Ismail, and
Lina.
thank you so much, Luca.